Have you ever wondered how people coped with the plague? What did they do when the world around them began to die? How did they try to save themselves? In the 14th century, Europe experienced one of the greatest tragedies in its history, the plague. Cities were dying. People were desperately trying to escape death. Villages were becoming deserted. Many turned to God for help. In the face of an incomprehensible threat, they sought solace in faith. But that's not all they did. Medieval people were not entirely defenseless against the plague. They had some knowledge, some experience from dealing with epidemics before. They knew that somehow this disease was carried by rodents and insects. Well, they didn't know about bacteria, of course. So they used various methods to fight rodents and insects. Kept cats, for example. Cats were considered not only cute and fluffy animals, but also exterminators of mice and other vermin. It was believed that the fewer rodents, the fewer diseases. But of course, this was not enough. Gradually, people began to close their eyes to the fact that the plague was God's punishment. They were looking for other explanations. People realized that overcrowded cities and lack of hygiene were contributing to the spread of the plague. To escape the deadly disease, people fled to the countryside, to forests. But this was a big mistake because the plague was everywhere and it wasn't going anywhere. Many died in the wilderness. People returned to cities, but they were cautious now. They were afraid of each other, of strangers. Suspicion and fear grew, and they began to look for someone to blame. The plague was alien to medieval Europeans. But when a similar disease broke out in Asia, it was called the plague. And when it reached Europe, people continued to call it the Asian disease. This way, they wanted to say it's them to blame. We're just victims of circumstance. Medieval people were also suspicious of physicians and pharmacists. They claimed that plague boils could be cured with special medicines. But everyone understood these so-called healers were only interested in money. In reality, they had no idea how to treat the plague. And while people were looking for a way to defeat the plague, the clergy was preaching repentance. Medieval people believed the plague was God's punishment for their sins. Therefore, in order to avoid his anger, they needed to show their devotion. Religious orders organized processions through cities, carrying a cross and icons. But this did not stop the epidemic. Ordinary people, however, were not going to wait for deliverance from above. They took matters into their own hands. In those dark hours, people tried to help each other. Families cared for the sick, neighbors shared food. They also tried to prevent the spread of the disease. To protect themselves from infection, medieval people stayed away from each other as much as possible. They sealed windows and doors with damp cloths, believing that the disease could enter through these openings. Streets were washed with vinegar and urine, and some even tried to disinfect themselves with smoke. They were burning special herbs and incense. Medieval people also believed that certain plants could drive away the evil spirits that caused the disease. Garlic, onions, rue, and sage were popular. They were hung in homes and worn on their bodies. They even made special amulets and charms out of these herbs. But the scariest thing during the plague was the cemeteries. There were simply too many dead people. The corpses were buried in mass graves. When the plague hit England, the cemeteries were full so quickly that they had to dig another huge pit in the yard of the local church. Today it's hard to imagine such a sight, but back then it was a common occurrence. So how did survivors cope with all this? Many of them simply went crazy. They were haunted by visions of dead people, by nightmares. Some saw the faces of the dead among the living, heard the moans of the dying and the rustle of leaves. For some, every cough sounded like the harbinger of death. They couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. They were afraid to leave their homes, afraid of infection. Survivors developed neurasthenia, which in turn led to other diseases. People could no longer work as before. Entire families were wiped out by the plague. The survivors were traumatized and shocked. The joyful and carefree life that once was has gone forever. There would be no turning back. Life went on, though. New villages were founded, cities were rebuilt, and people lived as best they could. After all, even in the darkest times, life always goes on. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson we can learn from the plague. If you liked the video, then do 3 quick, easy, and fast things for me. Smash that like button. It helps the algorithm know that this video matters. So do share it with your friends and let them also learn something new. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next interesting release. And one more thing, if you have any feedback, comment below. I would love to hear from you and make the videos better. So that's it for me. See you in the next video.